We all think we know the story of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, right? A lone gunman, a tragic night at the theater. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The truth is, this wasn't just one man's act. Full-blown conspiracy, a desperate, violent plot designed to literally break the United States government just as it was starting to put itself back together.
Think about the irony here. On the very day he would be killed, April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln turned to his wife and said these words: "The Civil War, this long, awful nightmare, was finally over. The whole country was breathing a collective sigh of relief, and so was the president." But that feeling, well, it wouldn't last the night.
So let's go back. Let's really set the scene for what was supposed to be a night of pure celebration, marking a brand new start for the nation. I mean, you have to imagine Washington, D.C. on this night. It was absolutely electric. After 4 long, brutal years, the war was done. The Confederate Army had surrendered just a few days before, so the city was just erupting with bonfires, parades, pure, unfiltered joy. The Union had survived. And the absolute epicenter of all this excitement? Ford's Theater. It was packed. We're talking 1,600 people crammed inside to see this hit comedy, Our American Cousin. And of course, they were all there to share in the victory with the man who led them through it all, President Lincoln himself. But, while all this celebration was happening, there was one person inside that theater who was getting ready to play a very, very different role. And that was John Wilkes Booth. Now, this guy was basically a rock star of his time, a super famous, charismatic actor. But underneath all that fame, he was a die-hard Confederate sympathizer who absolutely hated Abraham Lincoln. To Booth, Lincoln wasn't a hero who saved the country. He was a tyrant who had destroyed the South. And this is where his knowledge as an actor becomes just chilling. He knew this play inside and out. So around 10:20 p.m., he just slips into the presidential box, which was left unguarded. And he waits. He waits for the one specific line in the play that he knows will get the biggest laugh of the entire show. As the theater fills with laughter, he pulls the trigger. One shot. Then he dramatically leaps down onto the stage, shouts the Virginia state motto, Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means thus always to tyrants, and then vanishes into the chaos he just created. But here's the thing. That single shot, that chaos at Ford's Theater, that was only one part of a much bigger, much more horrifying plan. This was an attempt to completely destabilize the U.S. government. So, naturally, the first big question for investigators was this just one crazy actor? They found out pretty quickly that the answer was a terrifying no. The real plan was just staggering. At the very same moment Booth was at the theater, 2 other assassins were supposed to be striking across the city. The goal was to take out the president, the vice president, and the secretary of state all at once. It was a plot to literally decapitate the government's entire line of succession and throw the whole country into absolute turmoil. Now, thankfully, the other 2 attacks completely fell apart. The attack on Secretary of State Seward was absolutely brutal. One of Booth's guys, Lewis Powell, basically turns the secretary's home into a bloodbath, attacking him with a knife. It's a miracle, but Seward actually survived. And then you have the guy who was supposed to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. Well, he just lost his nerve, went to a hotel bar, and got drunk instead. So, with the country reeling from the news, one of the biggest manhunts in American history kicked off. It was time for the final and very violent wrecking. The very next morning, April 15th, at 7:22 a.m., it was official. Abraham Lincoln, the man who had just saved the Union, was pronounced dead. In an instant, a nation that was celebrating was now a nation in mourning. For 12 straight days, John Wilkes Booth was the most wanted man in America. The massive search finally cornered him in a tobacco barn out in rural Virginia. He flat out refused to surrender, so federal troops lit the barn on fire to smoke him out, and in the middle of all that chaos, a soldier shot Booth in the neck. As he lay there dying, paralyzed, Booth reportedly whispered his last words, "Useless, useless." What did he mean? Was he talking about his own life? His failed cause? We'll never really know for sure. But those were the haunting final words from the man who killed a president. The ringleader was dead, but the conspiracy wasn't. A military court found 8 other people guilty. 4 of them were sentenced to death and hanged. and that included Mary Surratt, the woman who owned the boarding house where the conspirators met. Her execution was a huge deal at the time. It made her the very first woman ever to be executed by the US federal government. So the trial brings this really grim end to the Civil War era. But here's the thing. In a way, the conspiracy actually worked. Lincoln's whole idea for a peaceful, merciful Reconstruction pretty much died with him. Instead, you get the chaotic and divisive presidency of Andrew Johnson. So while the plot didn't destroy the government, you could argue it did something worse. It changed the course of American history, closing one terrible chapter only to open another one, filled with new struggles that would haunt the nation for decades.